about their first-hand experiences with eating disorders. So, yeah, if you could just give a really warm welcome to Zoe and Charlie for speaking to us today.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for having us today, guys. A little bit about me before we get going. My name's Zoe. I'm 24 years old. I'm a PhD student at Cardiff School of Social Sciences, and as mentioned, I'm a Vegan Youth Ambassador. And I think what a privilege it is to stand here today on a day that recognises the significance of mental health as something really worth addressing, both professionally, academically, and personally. And over the course of my 20-minute talk, I'm going to tell you a bit about my suffering with eating disorders, some of the problems I faced in terms of receiving treatment or feeling confident enough to get treatment, and then going on to more positive experiences in terms of recovery. And then there'll be a few telephone numbers if you feel like you yourself need help with an eating disorder, or if you want any more information about how you can help someone else. So unfortunately, there was a lot of suffering, and in terms of how I'm going to be presenting this today, it's really why I think I suffered with an eating disorder, or a range of eating disorders. And the first experience in terms of why I think I suffered came when I was about 6 years old. Unfortunately, I remember very vividly sitting on my bunk bed, wishing that I could just get rid of my stomach, like really vividly, wanting to just get rid of it. And obviously there's a lot of social elements to that. But from about 6, I always felt like an outcast. I always felt very, very anxious about myself. And I think people underestimate the intelligence children have in terms of how they think of themselves and how they think of others. Learning fatness equals bad, equals ugly, equals unwanted. And of course, not feeling very desired in terms of friendships and networks you make when you're younger. So from then on, I've always disliked myself from a very young age. And I think of my nieces and how they're about 5 years old now, and I think it's just a shame that we have discourses around bodies and discourses around each other that enable thoughts like that to happen in such young, beautiful things. So the experiences I had from that age always stuck with me, always kind of interlinked with the eating disorders I had. But the first actual experience of an eating disorder came when I was about 14, 15, and it really is quite difficult to pinpoint specific reasons because you don't decide. Well, I didn't decide to do it; it just happened. So, of course, there was a lot of loneliness. I was overweight, and I was an alternative teenager. So, obviously, my bodily presence brought a lot of focus, both in school and in town. But then I was also a very excited person. I remember watching a vampire documentary and just started to eat. And then that was how it started. There was no real plan to do anything. It just took hold. And I'm not sure whether that's kind of a result from the underlying issues of feeling lonely. Both of my parents worked 2 to 3 jobs trying to provide for us, so they weren't in the house. My sister was always out with her friends, so it kind of set a really good hiding place. And I lived in the village, so that I had one friend in the village. So really, it was out of boredom, possibly out of excitement, possibly out of depression. There are a real range of instances, but unfortunately, I didn't get any treatment. It lasted for about 4 or 5 months. I think my parents knew because there were signs when they came back home, but nothing really was ever spoken about. I think, if anything, they thought it was just a teenage phase or seeking for attention or something like that. But I remember it really was a dark time. I also binge drank a lot, to a very bad extent, and obviously drinking alcohol, also self-harming. It really is a vicious circle in terms of how are you meant to boost your self-esteem to get out of those situations when all you ever do is negative things to your body. So unfortunately, no treatment. I ended up overcoming that based on, I suppose, new patterns at home, whether my mum would come home earlier, so it stopped me from doing anything. That stopped after about 5 months, but then I always had low self-esteem. kind of in and out of depression, in and out of anxiety. And then my second experience with eating disorders came when I was about 19 or 20. Again, a range of variables which may have caused the eating disorder to arise. So I suffered with ADNOS, which is eating disorders not otherwise specified, and that had anorexic tendencies. I started going to the gym to do something about my body because I didn't like it, but then I also got in a very emotionally abusive relationship. And for those who may not know anything about abusive relationships, they kind of sever your network ties. So they sever your friendship ties, they sever your family ties. So really, you feel very alone. They're the only person you depend on. And of course, that kind of made me feel worse about myself in terms of comments, in terms of fear. So it really is a very complicated thing to kind of pinpoint, because I don't know whether it rose out of purely wanting to lose weight at the gym, or whether I felt it was the only thing I had control over in my life. And I did have antidepressants, but to an extent there may be a chemical imbalance that may open me to be more likely to these experiences. But for me, it's more the social factors of what I was experiencing that can't just be helped by giving you a pill for 5 to 6 weeks. And I did have counselling as well, because the pains that my body was experiencing made me seek help. But I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my family. Didn't tell my friends, obviously, because when I didn't feel ill enough, which I'll get onto momentarily, but because from the relationship that I was hiding from people, if I came out with one thing, it would link to the other thing, so I wanted to keep it very private. So I went to counselling, talked about the food issues, but obviously I think what the main cause was the abusive relationship, and of course I didn't mention that, so the real kind of issues underpinning my thoughts and my behaviours weren't addressed. So perhaps if I opened up, something more positive may have come out of that at the end. But that lasted for about 4 or 5 months. Again, because my patterns were changed, it was around Christmas time I went home, I was away from the abusive partner, people were observing me, not on purpose, but just being around people, you start to realise what you're eating like or not eating like and acting like. So that managed to change. And I was fine for about 4 or 5 months again, and then the relationship ended. Interestingly, this is kind of the only experience of eating disorders that wasn't due to my body, like body issues and like self-esteem issues. It was purely out of loneliness and purely out of stress and depression, because as I mentioned, abusive partners sever your ties with pretty much anyone that could help you. And then I lost the only person who I thought I could have anything with. So I really just did feel on my own. So yeah, that really was just loneliness, that stress, working full time, trying to fit in kind of happiness, and then being in university full time as well. Again, unfortunately, there was no treatment for that, which I will discuss in more detail in about 5 minutes. And then I managed to, overcome those thoughts, meeting a new person that was very respectful and very understanding. And then, unfortunately, an incident happened with the ex-partner about a year after. And because I feared for my life, I had to tell people about what he was like. But then, actually talking, a huge amount of guilt rose inside of me, realising how much I kept from people. It was a 1.5-year relationship, so keeping everything that happened from my family, it just ate me up inside. So then I started to talk to them about the eating disorders as well, and mentally come to terms with both the relationship and what I was doing to my body. I think that just took its utter toll on me, because obviously confronting some of the issues as to why you're having an eating disorder can be very stressful, which is why recovery and how we define recovery and how we provide treatment for recovery is very important, because each case is very individual and it needs to be addressed and analysed as a case-by-case basis. But it was an extremely, very, very dark period for me. And I received 2 to 3 months of counselling at the university, obviously because my experiences with the eating disorder and my body image issues were very much linked to that relationship for a long time. They addressed both the eating disorders I experienced in that counselling session, those counselling sessions, so that was really helpful. But even after the counselling, and even after experiences of bulimia, which were, it didn't really happen too often, but it was more the mental thoughts of not letting your body do the things that I wanted to do. It's very, very tiring. People wouldn't really understand why I didn't want to go out, and it's because I battled for 9 hours today, trying to work, trying to not make myself sick, trying to not hurt myself. It's very tiring. It's extremely tiring. And you know, I was ill so much because I was tired from not doing the horrible things to my body. So that really did take a very long time. But as I've really expressed, I didn't really receive that much treatment because I didn't ask for it. And the reason why I never asked for help is because I didn't feel ill enough, and I didn't feel like my problems were legitimate enough to seek help. And I think that revolves around the discourses around different eating disorders generally, and the different discourses around what real abuse is. And I think, you know, how we define a body as ill or healthy, and how some eating disorders are not seen as serious enough, you know, they were the main causes. And I think a quote that expresses that very well here is in a poem by Blythe Baird, and I would really suggest you looking up some of her work. I think she captures a lot of what I was feeling when I was younger as well. So she says, if you develop an eating disorder when you were already thin to begin with, you go to the hospital. If you develop an eating disorder when you were not thin to begin with, you are a success story. And when I experienced EGNOS, I obviously lost a lot of weight, but I was still, in terms of the BMI, I was still healthy, maybe even overweight. And you know, people would say, oh, you look so great. Oh, I bet you feel fantastic. And inside, I just wanted to die. And I think we focus a lot as a society on how the body looks and not how the body feels, not how we feel. And obviously, again, in an abusive relationship, when other people tell you compliments, you hold on to those compliments because they make you feel like a human being. So when they were telling me these positive things, I wanted to hear more positive things. So I didn't want to change anything. And in a way, I think I felt like I was being seen for the first time. Like being seen as attractive and being seen as a body with having. So I think how we approach when we see someone who's lost a lot of weight, we need to approach it differently other than just going, you look fantastic, because you don't know what's really happening behind the scenes. But also, I think some of the simplistic advice people were giving, but they were trying to be helpful, but it was just making me feel worse because it made you feel like if you can't control what you eat, what everyone else manages to do on a daily basis, 3 times a day, then are you even worth anything at all? You know, can't you just eat that, or can't you just not eat that? And you're suffering with a mental illness. You know, in my instance, I was suffering with an abusive relationship. I was suffering with depression, anxiety that I was suffering with since I was 6 years old. You can't just wipe the slate clean and go, okay, I'll just overcome all of the horrible things I've experienced just to eat this, you know. And again, eating disorders are very, very complex, very, very difficult. And when you say stuff like this, it makes you feel even more irrelevant, because to everyone else it is easy to just eat that toast or do this, and then it makes you feel like even worse about yourself. So I think those are some of the reasons why I didn't seek help. But then, of course, let's not remember, I'm here as a young ambassador, so I have recovered. I've technically recovered about 4 or 5 times. It's like trying to have eating disorder bingo for me, it seems. But how did it feel? And I want to say it felt great, but it felt horrible, because suppressing, 22 years of self-hatred and abuse and, all these things. Coming to terms with that is very, very hard, because you need to like yourself as a human being, worthy of living and worthy of respecting yourself. And of course, the first 5 months were the darkest experience of my life. And then after that, you realise, you write down what you've overcome, and it's like, wow, aren't I awesome? But, it does get easier. The more I talk to people, the more easier it gets to, because you're helping people. But again, what has helped? Well, counselling was really good. They made me accept my experiences as legitimate experiences. Forgiveness, because, when you're suffering, when you're ill, you're not yourself. So I think I had to forgive myself for all the times I made people angry, or on the times I made myself feel angry. Apologising to your past self and saying, it's okay that happened. I was ill. Now I'm not ill, and I can look to improve my self-confidence, and my body confidence, which very much links to the issue of letting stuff go. Letting go of the clothes you wore when you were ill, getting rid of those pair of jeans that you always think, oh, I'll fit into those again, because it doesn't matter if you fit into those again, because a pair of jeans is a pair of jeans. It's not your self-worth. And letting go of old goals. So when I mentioned earlier on about the sporting activities that I got into, I basically wanted to fit into a weight category for kickboxing, and that's how the weight loss initially developed alongside the abusive relationship. So instead of kickboxing, I started doing American football and powerlifting, because there's no weight classes involved for American football, and I like smashing people. That's the most important point. And powerlifting as well. I do love being very active, and I do love, getting stronger and feeling really empowered by doing these things. Even in weightlifting, there's anyone can enter, because the weight categories are just above and beyond. Who did I turn to? I'm a cat lady, by the way, haven't guessed already. Yay! Of course, my counselling, but also my cat. When I was first talking to my counsellor, I wasn't ready yet to tell my family the details of what happened in the relationship and the details of what my eating disorders entailed, because obviously if you don't really know much about eating disorders, you won't know what it feels like or what you do. So my cat was the person I would tell first. And then also social media. I've been trying to get involved with as many volunteering things as possible, in terms of mental health in general, and then eating disorders specifically. And I found that writing posts on Instagram and Facebook actually really helped me before. I'd rather my parents found out that way than me telling them face to face. And I had such a positive reception when opening up to people, in posts, and you realise how many people are suffering with mental health issues and eating disorders. When I posted it, I just got message after message after message, and I think it's a real shame that mental health in general is quite taboo, and the longer we keep it inside, the longer everyone else suffers individually rather than trying to help each other. But how long did it take? It took a very long time, but that is okay, because as the experiences I've shown you, it will be very unnatural for you to get over that in about 3 months, and it is as cliche as it sounds, it is a roller coaster experience, but again, that's okay. And before I finish off, I just want you to kind of remember that there are resources available for yourself if you're suffering, or for yourself if you are worried about someone you care about. But most importantly, there's no right way to have an eating disorder. You can suffer for 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, and it doesn't matter. You deserve help as a human being. And regardless of the type of eating disorder, regardless of how much you weigh, I would really, really go seek help, because it can get out of control very, very quickly. Another cat. But eating disorders can be beaten, and that is, the real message here. They can be beaten, and you don't have to go through this alone, and it is okay to ask for support. There's some numbers here if you wanted to write them down, and also my email address if you wanted to. If you forget to ask me any questions tonight, you're more than welcome to email me, and I'll get back to you. But I hope you enjoyed, and that's it. Hello.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say thank you
Oh.
for sharing that. Like, quite imagine I know across the screen, but
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. It really is, and I do take great joy, strangely, in telling people, because based on how many people have gotten back to me in messages saying, "Oh, that I've experienced that," or "I've experienced this," and excuse me, and a lot of the things I've talked about here, mental health, emotional abuse. A lot of them aren't seen as being that bad as, say, physical abuse, or as bad as anorexia. Do you know what I mean? So the more I kind of open this message that you don't have to have one thing for it to be serious enough for you to get help, that's, it's really empowering for me as a person as well. Hello.
you mentioned that like when you first started suffering when you were a younger teenager, that you didn't say anything to parents and friends or anything like that. When you did start to be a bit more open with the people around you, what sort of reaction did you get?
I think that they don't really know how to react, if that makes sense. I think they just want me to be okay, so when I go home now, they're very much more, don't get yourself stressed out, don't, but they didn't really say anything. Obviously, like, they say, "Oh, so proud of you, we love you," but they haven't really asked many things, but I don't think they're really educated enough to respond to my answers. I can tell them a range of reasons, like they wouldn't have really understood. So wouldn't really understand even if I gave them a presentation. I think obviously if you're a parent or if you're a loved one, they won't really see how you suffered. If that makes sense. Like they can't comprehend that someone they love so much went through something. And I think that's what a lot of parents find very difficult. Or I didn't really want to tell them too much either, because I wouldn't want them to blame themselves for anything, because there wasn't anything they did, there wasn't anything they could really change. I hope that answers your question. Hi.
Following on from what you said, is there like a specific thing that helped you try to make you feel better that actually had the opposite effect?
I think just it spreads to mental health in general, and people say just be positive and just try to eat this, or oh, you're overreacting again, and it's like I've tried to explain what it's like to suffer with an eating disorder, try and battle urges, because that's the most stressful thing, is actually stopping it or trying to stop it. And it's like if you smoke for 10 years and then have to quit smoking cold turkey, the physical effect of not doing something, sweats, anxiety, rage, those are all the things I was experiencing. So people were saying, can't you just not eat that? It's like, I'm trying to, but it's just so overwhelming for me right now. And yeah, it was just those comments like, oh, can't you just not eat that? That one is actually just because it makes you feel like a child, because everyone can eat, basically. Like, people function on a day-to-day basis by eating. Like, children eat. Do you know what I mean? So obviously when you're incapable of eating properly, it already makes you feel very vulnerable, or it makes you feel I felt very pathetic, basically. That's how I felt. Pathetic because I couldn't function. So I think, hi.
So on the flip side to that question, do you think there's anything that anyone said that actually truly helped, that actually made you so wow?
I think what helps is when people don't say everything's okay, when people say that's awful, because that makes your experiences legitimate, if that makes sense. Like when people go, oh, you're right, that is awful, I'm sorry you're going through that. You need kind of that kind of discourse rather than, oh, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. And it's like, it's really not, because everything's going wrong for me right now. So I think if anyone wants to be helpful, approach it more. I'm really sorry that's happening. If you want to talk, tell me about it, rather than kind of dismissing it. Hello.
How hard was it to distinguish exactly what you had? Because I know, like, with depression and some eating disorders, it can be hard to distinguish what you have if you don't know anything about it.
In terms of my eating disorders, in terms of the bulimia, I just kind of did it so much that I knew what it was. In terms of the EDNOS, that's kind of a bit more of a tricky area, but it was because if I was, it's like the poet kind of expressed, if I was thin, I would have been anorexic, because I wasn't thin to begin with. It was EDNOS with anorexic tendencies. Am I answering this question well?
Yeah.
Sorry, just like, but yeah, I mean, I think, especially for me, you know, a young woman, you learn a lot about what eating disorders are when you're younger, just because they talk about it in magazines, like when you're like in Shout magazine, when you're 8. And I remember reading something, and I think this as well has really like always stuck with me from when I was about 6. There was like a true or false section in Shout magazine. I didn't read the true or false section because I was like 8, couldn't bother to read that part. And it was like, your bottom is half your body weight. And I read that and I felt so like happy that half my body weight was just my bum, it's just my bum. And then reading that was false just filled me with despair. And it's like, that rubbish should not be in children's magazines. Like, and then it's also the fact that I felt just tremendous happiness, that I thought that half my body weight was in my bottom and not on my belly. Do you know what I mean? Sorry, I completely forgot the question. I forgot that. Oh, sorry.
So if we,
Hello,
I
sorry.
think we'll call it now and then try to.
Oh, yes.
At the end, it's really great there are so many questions. If people want to ask more questions, I think we'll briefly to
Yeah, sorry, I might have talked for like longer.
So